The young and the restless spoilers the dark depths. Sharon's desperate struggle. The damp air in the underground chamber was suffocating, the darkness so oppressive that it felt as though the walls were closing in. Sharon sat on the cold, rough floor, her wrists raw from the relentless pulling of the chains that bound her. Her cries for help echoed through the cavernous space, but no one answered. "Is anyone there?" she screamed, her voice breaking with desperation. Tears streamed down her face, and though the room was stocked with enough food to sustain her for weeks, she couldn't bring herself to eat. Her appetite had been replaced by a deep, gnawing fear that she was truly alone in this hellish place. But she wasn't. Cameron's arrival out of the shadows, Cameron emerged, his figure barely visible but his presence unmistakable. Sharon recoiled instinctively, her eyes narrowing with a mix of fear and suspicion. He always appeared when she was at her lowest, his calm demeanor only adding to her unease. "Sharon," he said smoothly, his voice a blend of mock concern and cold detachment. "You need to calm down. This hysteria won't help you. Why are you doing this to me?" Sharon snapped, her voice trembling with both anger and despair. "Let me out of here. Please." Cameron crouched down, just far enough to be out of her reach, and tilted his head as if he were considering her plea. "I might help you," he said with a faint smirk. "If you want to get out of here, all you have to do is ask nicely." Sharon's lip quivered as she stared at him, hatred burning in her eyes. "You're sick. You enjoy this, don't you?" Cameron laughed softly, standing again and pacing around the room. "Oh, Sharon. You misunderstand me. I'm not your captor. I'm just an observer. Besides," he said, gesturing toward the far end of the chamber, "you're not the only one here." The voice in the shadows. Sharon froze. For days, she had been hearing faint cries, whispers of agony that she had convinced herself were figments of her imagination. Her mind had been playing tricks on her, she thought, amplifying her loneliness and despair until even silence became unbearable. But now, hearing Cameron's words, a chill ran down her spine. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper. Cameron smiled cryptically. "At the end of the hall, there's another door. And behind that door, well, let's just say you're not the only one with a story to tell." Sharon shook her head, refusing to believe him. "No. You're lying. There's no one else here. Just me, and my broken mind." As if on cue, the faint sound of a woman's voice echoed through the chamber. "Help me," it pleaded, weak and desperate. Sharon's breath hitched. The voice wasn't her own. It was real. Sharon's doubt and despair. "No," Sharon muttered, pressing her hands to her ears. "No, no, no. It's not real. I'm hearing things again." "Are you sure?" Cameron asked, his tone taunting. "The voice sounds awfully real to me. Maybe you should check. Or maybe not. After all, isn't it easier to just pretend it's all in your head?" Sharon glared at him, her anger flaring. "If someone's down there, why don't you go and open the door? Why don't you help her?" Cameron chuckled and shook his head. "Oh, no. That's not my role in this little drama. I'm just here to keep you company. To make sure you don't lose your mind completely. Whether you help her or not, that's up to you." A moral dilemma. The cries grew louder, more insistent, and Sharon's resolve began to waver. She hated herself for hesitating, but fear rooted her to the spot. What if it was a trap? What if Cameron was manipulating her, using the voice to break her further? Or worse, what if the voice was real, and there truly was someone else suffering in the same way she was? "Why me?" Sharon whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you doing this to me?" Cameron's expression softened, though the glint in his eyes remained cold. "Because, Sharon, you're stronger than you think. But strength means nothing if you don't use it. So go ahead. Make your choice." With that, Cameron retreated into the shadows, leaving Sharon alone once more. The cries from the far end of the chamber continued, haunting and relentless, as Sharon grappled with the crushing weight of her decision. What lies beyond the door? Sharon's hands trembled as she reached for the chain holding her in place. Her mind raced with questions. Was the voice real? Could she trust her instincts, or had her captivity warped her perception of reality? And if the voice was real, did she even have the strength to help someone else when she could barely hold herself together? In the suffocating darkness, Sharon faced a choice that would define her. Would she confront the unknown, risking everything to help the voice behind the door? Or would she remain in her corner, paralyzed by fear and doubt, waiting for a salvation that might never come? As the cries grew louder, more desperate, Sharon knew one thing for certain: whatever lay beyond that door, she couldn't ignore it any longer. And somewhere in the shadows, Cameron watched, a faint smile on his lips, waiting to see what she would do. This narrative builds tension and highlights Sharon's emotional turmoil while adding layers of mystery to Cameron's role and the voice in the shadows. The moral dilemma leaves the reader wondering what Sharon will choose and whether her decision will lead to salvation, or something far worse. The woman in the shadows. Sharon had spent days in the oppressive darkness of the underground chamber, her cries for help growing weaker as the futility of her situation weighed on her. The muffled pleas of another prisoner echoed faintly down the corridor, but Sharon, overwhelmed by her own despair, had dismissed them as hallucinations. Yet, deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was trapped in this nightmare with her. The questions clawed at her mind. Who is she? Why is she here? And most hauntingly, what does she want? When the metal door creaked open, Sharon's heart leapt. It was Jordan, the enigmatic figure who had been keeping her confined. His face was as unreadable as ever, a mask of cold detachment that only added to her unease. He carried 2 trays of food and placed one in front of Sharon. Sharon glared at him. What's the point of feeding me? You're just keeping me alive to suffer. Jordan ignored her venomous words, sliding the other tray across the floor toward the shadows at the far end of the chamber. Sharon frowned, her curiosity piqued. Who's that for? She asked sharply. Are you keeping someone else down here? Jordan's hand froze mid-motion, but he quickly recovered, brushing off her question. It's none of your concern, he said curtly, his voice clipped. Eat your food. But Sharon's suspicions had been confirmed. There was someone else, a presence she had felt but couldn't fully believe until now. The name that must not be spoken. As Jordan turned to leave, Sharon pressed him again. Who is she? Why won't you tell me? Jordan paused at the door, his hand resting on the handle. He didn't meet Sharon's gaze as he replied, his voice low and deliberate. You don't want to know, Sharon? Trust me. Knowing her name would only make things harder for you. The cryptic response sent a chill down Sharon's spine. What kind of name could evoke both fear and hope in equal measure? She watched as Jordan slipped out of the room, leaving her alone with her racing thoughts, and the knowledge that she wasn't truly alone. But before the door closed, something strange happened. Cameron appeared, slipping silently into the room like a shadow. He placed a finger to his lips, signaling Sharon to stay quiet. Cameron, Sharon hissed, her voice trembling with a mix of relief and frustration. Why are you hiding? What's going on? Cameron's eyes flicked toward the far end of the chamber, where the other prisoners' cries had grown faint. Don't say a word about me, he whispered urgently. Jordan doesn't know I'm here. And he doesn't need to. Sharon narrowed her eyes. Why are you sneaking around like this? Do you know who she is? Cameron hesitated for a moment, his face unreadable. Finally, he said, I know enough to tell you this: don't trust Jordan. And don't let your curiosity get the better of you. The other prisoner. Sharon's resolve weakened as the cries from the other side of the chamber grew louder. The woman's voice was hoarse and filled with despair, each plea for help cutting through Sharon's fragile state of mind. Please, the voice whispered. If anyone can hear me, help me. Sharon closed her eyes, trying to block out the sound. But she couldn't ignore the pang of guilt twisting in her stomach. If it were her, wouldn't she want someone to answer her cries? Cameron's warning lingered in her mind. But so did Jordan's cryptic remark about the prisoner's name. What was it about this woman that made her so dangerous or important? Jordan's game. Hours later, Jordan returned, his demeanor as calm and detached as before. Sharon decided to confront him again, despite Cameron's warnings. "I want to know who she is," Sharon demanded, her voice firmer this time. "You can't keep us both locked down here and expect me to sit in silence." Jordan raised an eyebrow, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "And what will you do with that information, Sharon? You're chained to the floor. Knowing won't change a thing." "Maybe not," Sharon shot back, "but it's better than sitting here wondering." Jordan sighed, as if debating whether to humor her. Finally, he leaned in close, his tone dropping to a whisper. "Her name is Cassie." Sharon's breath caught in her throat. The name hit her like a bolt of lightning, leaving her stunned and disoriented. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "That's not possible. Cassie's dead." Jordan straightened, his expression cold and impassive. "Believe what you want," he said. "But if I were you, I'd focus less on the past and more on surviving the present." The revelation. As Jordan left, Sharon's mind reeled. Could it really be Cassie, the daughter she had lost so many years ago? The thought filled her with equal parts hope and terror. If it was Cassie, how had she survived? And why was she here, trapped in this underground nightmare? Cameron stepped out of the shadows once more, his face grim. "I told you not to push him," he said. "Now you're in deeper than ever." Sharon looked at him, her eyes blazing. "If it's Cassie, I have to know. I have to help her." Cameron shook his head. "You don't know what you're dealing with, Sharon. Sometimes the truth is worse than the lie." But Sharon couldn't let it go. The possibility that her daughter was alive, no matter how slim, was enough to reignite a fire within her. She would find a way to reach the woman at the end of the hall, no matter what it took. And somewhere in the shadows, Jordan watched, his lips curling into a sinister smile. The game was unfolding exactly as he had planned.